Everyone, it's Shannon here for Hero Arts. In today's video, we are going to create this Halloween card featuring the September card kit of the month. In the video, I'm going to share with you a really awesome technique for adding texture to your solid stamped images. We're going to start out with the Haunted Scenic stamp set. This is a large 6x8 stamp set included in the September card kit of the month. I'm going to grab that really awesome haunted house stamp, place it on some Dove White cardstock, and I'm going to ink it up with Granite Core Ink. I'm going to ink it up and stamp it a couple times just to build up the intensity and make sure it's nice and solid. After I've stamped it a couple of times, we're now going to do that super awesome, easy technique to add texture. I'm going to grab some black ink. I want a darker ink because I need some contrast, and I just angled my ink pad and swiped it over the surface of the stamp, and that will create these streaks. I will do it a couple more times just to kind of build up the intensity, but the real important part about this technique is you don't want to hold your ink pad completely flat to the surface or parallel to the surface of the stamp. You want to hold your ink pad at a little bit of an angle and then swipe, drag it over the stamp, and that's going to create lines over the stamp, and when you stamp it down onto the paper, those lines will transfer onto your paper. And the ink pad will also kind of naturally catch in some of the openings, so it kind of catches on the roof and the window openings, and that just adds a little bit more emphasis on those, and it just really is such a great technique for these solid stamps because this wouldn't show up on your classic line stamps. So such a fun and easy thing to do. You can see I'm going in here a couple more times, angling my ink pad even more so I can kind of add more stripes in some areas where I'm seeing there's not enough. But here is that finished result. So cool, looks very spooky, almost like weathered wood. Now for the tree actually has some texture. The stamp actually has some texture in it already. So all I'm going to do for this is stamp it a couple times in espresso, so nice brown, dark brown ink. Now for the pumpkins here, I'm also going to do that swiping technique to add texture. First, I stamped all the pumpkins in Pumpkin Core Ink. Now I grabbed my darker ink, in this case I'm using Espresso, and again I'm angling my ink pad and swiping over the surface. Now this is a much smaller stamp compared to the Haunted House, so it just is a very quick swipe and I'm done. I did it again to the top here and I'm stamping it just to kind of build up that intensity. Again, it's kind of catching on the top and the bottoms, kind of the sides, and it just has this super cool look. It's almost like I'm making texture on the pumpkin surface. I love it. It looks so cool. Now we're going to move on to our some of our other images that we're stamping for our scene. These bats here that I just simply stamped in INTENS-ified Black Ink, so just a black ink. This awesome kind of skeleton band. Love this image in this set. I'm going to ink these all these skeleton band members up in that INTENS-ified Black Ink and stamp it as well. Then I'm going to move on to doing a little bit of Copic Coloring because I want to add some color to the windows. I'm going to start with Y15, a yellow here, and I'm just going to color in all the windows in this haunted house. There are quite a lot. Once I finish coloring in all these windows, I'll then grab an orange and we'll do a little gradation. So I'm coloring at the base of all these windows with this YR04, and once I finish with that, I'll grab my yellow Y15 again and just kind of blend it out so it's a nice smooth gradation over those windows. And I love this look. It really makes this house kind of come alive. Then we're going to move on to the pumpkins. So even though I stamped the pumpkins in orange, we're going to do a little bit of Copic Coloring, starting with the jack-o'-lantern faces. Just color them in with that yellow, that Y15. And then I'm going to grab a green, YG67. And I'm actually going to color over all the leaves. And even though they're orange, because this green is kind of dark, I can kind of tint them a little bit with green. Then I'll move on to the stems, and I've grabbed a brown E37 and just quickly color in the stems a little bit so they have a little contrast from the rest of the orange kind of color of the pumpkin. Now we're going to move on to coloring the tree. I have a lighter brown here. This is E35, and I'm just going to color in basically the whole tree. The tree has a little bit of white space in the bark and the texture of the bark, so I just colored that in. And that actually completes all my Copic Coloring. So just a little bit of Copic Coloring kind of steps these images up a little bit, and it was very quick and easy to do. Now moving on to die cutting these images out with the coordinating dies also included in the September card kit of the month. Love how all these band members are cut out at once, making it very easy, but they are all individual, so I don't have to use all of them for my scene if I don't want to. So now I'm figuring out my positioning for the moon. I'm going to stamp it on an A2 top folding white card base. Once I figure out where I want it to go, I'm going to remove the haunted house, add some anti-static powder because we're actually going to emboss over this. But before we do that, we're going to stamp it in some colored ink, starting off first with Lemon Drop Reactive Ink, and then we'll move on to Creamsicle. This is also a reactive ink. Reactive inks are a hybrid ink, so they ink blend beautifully. I've just loaded up my blending brush here with a little bit of that Creamsicle, tapped the lower half of that moon with that inked up blending brush, and that transfers a beautiful soft blend of that creamsicle onto my paper. So I end up having this really absolutely perfect gradation over my moon. So here's that finished stamped moon. Now I'm going to leave this card base, my stamped card base, in my MISTI, and I'm now going to ink up the moon in Hero Art's embossing and watermark ink. After I've stamped it, I'll then dip it into some clear embossing powder. And make sure you're using clear because you don't want to lose that beautiful yellow gradation, yellow-orange gradation that we created. Then I will heat set it, and then we have that beautiful shiny moon that's now safe and protected for our next step, which is the ink blending. I'm going to load up my blending brush here. This is a large blending brush with granite, a very, very light gray. In fact, it's so light you can't really even see it on camera here, but I do ink blend starting from the top down to like the lower, I stopped just before the lower third of the card front with that granite, and then I'll move on to a darker gray. This is Charcoal Core Ink, and ink blend that upper third with the that darker gray, and we'll just create this beautiful gradation with that darker gray at the top and lighter as you get, actually goes to the white of the paper as you get down to the lower third of the panel, which I really love the contrast that we get with our images with that white of the paper at the bottom of our card front. So now we're going to move on to our sentiment. I have a sentiment from that clear stamp set. I'm going to stamp it onto some pitch black cardstock in Unicorn Pigment Ink. I love to use Unicorn Pigment Ink for my white heat embossing. It just does such a great job. So after I've stamped it a couple times in the Unicorn Pigment Ink, I dipped it into some Hero Arts white embossing powder, heat set with my heat tool, and then die cut it out with the coordinating die. And just look at that sentiment. It was die cut out. The die cut so close around the words. It's just so beautiful and professional looking. Now we're going to put this whole scene together. We're going to start by just arranging everything, and then I'll pick it up with a piece of press and seal. I like to kind of get all my images in place before I really kind of know where everything's going to go before I stick anything down. So that's everything. So now I've picked it all. I'm going to pick it all up with a piece of press and seal. We are going to vary the dimension here. We're going to start with one layer of foam adhesive for the back side of the haunted house, and then I'm going to actually a little bit of liquid glue to the backside of the bats. So right now the only thing that has adhesive, the bats and the haunted house. The bats just have the liquid adhesive, so they're going to stick right down to the card front, while the haunted house will actually be popped up a little bit. So once I kind of get this centered, I'll stick it down, and then I'll carefully peel back the press and seal. Keep all those other die cuts stuck down to the press and seal because I want to keep them right where they are, that they're arranged just where I want them. Just shift those bats a little bit. They did kind of move around on me when I stuck it down because that liquid glue does have a little bit of wiggle room. So I just got them stuck down to the right place. Now I'm adding foam adhesive to the back side of my band, the sentiment, the tree, and the pumpkins. I did double up the foam adhesive at the bottom of the band members, on the pumpkins, as well as to the very right of the sentiment, because all those parts of these die cuts actually hang off of the haunted house, so they don't have any support. So they need to be doubled up because then that haunted house has one layer of foam adhesive, so those places need to be doubled wherever they're hanging off the haunted house. And that actually completes the card here once I stick those down. I really love how this turned out. I love this technique for adding texture to your solid stamps. It's such a great way to get kind of a different look out of them, and it's so easy to do. And also that little bit of coloring over the solid stamps where I did on the pumpkins is also a fun idea to kind of keep in your bag of tricks of what to do with your solid stamps. Hope you guys enjoyed today's card and video. If any questions about the products I used, please check out the links below in the description. Thank you so much for watching, and I hope you have a wonderful day.